It doesn't feel like my life. I feel like it is somebody else's story. It's psychological torture. You go completely insane. It is so damaging. I felt if I have to endure another day of this, if I could, I'd just kill myself. He stopped telling me he loved me over the phone.
Who told you that he was having an affair?
One of these for that cars on.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks. You okay?
Kylie Moore Gilbert, take one.
Kylie Moore Gilbert, hi. How are you feeling?
I'm okay, all things considered. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty positive.
Comfortable?
Yes.
Are you ready to tell me all about everything that happened?
As ready as I think I'll ever be.
Because obviously I'm quite mindful of, an interview when you've been through so much that you're in a place that you're happy to talk about things.
I am. I actually think it's quite therapeutic to talk. I want to talk about what happened to me.
Come on, speak up.
A young Kylie growing up, a country girl, you grew up in Bathurst in country New South Wales. What sparked your interest in the Middle East?
It wasn't sort of an immediate sparking of interest where suddenly I woke up one day and decided I wanted to research the Middle East. Growing up in the country, I wanted to get out of my country town as soon as possible when I was in high school. So I left Bathurst when I was 18 years old, did the typical thing that Aussie teenagers do after school and went backpacking. Moved to Europe, travelled around Europe, travelled around some other places like India, China, and the Middle East. And I really fell in love with the Middle East.
Did you always feel comfortable when you were travelling in the Middle East as a teenager at that point?
I wasn't alone. The first time I went to the Middle East, it was with my sister and a friend from New Zealand. And so, we were young, we were carefree, we weren't too worried about the risks. I decided that instead of coming back to Australia, I would study in the UK, and I got accepted into a fantastic program at Cambridge called Middle Eastern Studies.
So university at Cambridge, then you've come back to Australia to do your PhD in Melbourne at Melbourne University.
Yes. I have always been a bit of a nerd. I've always loved study. I've always loved writing and researching. And even from school, it was always something I was interested in.
So fast forward to 2018 and you travel overseas to attend a conference. What was the conference about?
It was more of a seminar, so it was to learn more about Shia Islam, the sect of Islam which is the majority religion in Iran and in a couple of Arab countries. And I'd always wanted to visit Iran, and I thought it was a great opportunity.
Were you excited?
Yes, I was. Yes. I'm always excited anytime I travel to the Middle East. It's a beautiful country with amazing history, amazing heritage, welcoming, hospitable people. It's a wonderful country.
Did you feel safe? Did you have any doubts?
Prior to my departure?
Yeah.
I did have some doubts. I mean, obviously, I wasn't thinking I would be arrested or I would have false accusations of espionage attached to my, very innocuous academic research project. But anytime you go to somewhere volatile like the Middle East, obviously you have to think, if this happens to me, if that happens to me, what am I going to do? So that stuff was going through my mind, but I certainly never imagined something like this would happen to me.
I read somewhere you were a guest of the Iranian government travelling. Is that... Because there's a lot of stuff, as you can imagine, floating around, and because we've never heard from you until now.
Yeah.
We don't know what's true and what isn't.
No, I wasn't a guest of the Iranian government in that the Iranian government didn't invite me or anything. I was invited by the University of Religions and Denominations in Qom. I was invited by them to attend the seminar. So they contacted me. It wasn't that I contacted them.
You then decided to extend your trip. So when the seminar finished, how long were you staying on for?
Not too much, maybe a week and a half, I think, not too long.
And why did you decide to stay longer?
I just wanted to see a bit more of Iran. And there were a few people I wanted to meet, Bahrainis living in Iran, to interview for my research. So I thought extending my trip by a week and a half would give me the opportunity to conduct some research interviews and to just experience the country. You know, I didn't know if I'd be back.
It's September 2018 and you head to the airport to fly home. How did it all unfold?
I'd arrived, I checked in for my Emirates flight, and the man who checked me in took my 2 bags off the carousel. And I said, "What are you doing? Why are you taking my bags off?" And he wouldn't look at me, and he, you know, in retrospect, his behaviour was suspicious. And a group of people came up to me and stopped me and told me they had a warrant for my arrest and I needed to come with them.
So were they in uniform?
No, they didn't show me a licence, a badge, anything. They showed me a printout in Farsi claiming this was an order from a judge for my arrest. And I said, "Well, what do you mean my arrest? I haven't done anything. And what is this? I don't understand Farsi. You know, can someone translate this for me? It could be anything." And I said, "What do you mean come with you? Where am I going? What do you want from me?" And they said, "Madam, you must come with us now." And there was a female guard there who sort of grabbed my elbow and we walked off.
What are you thinking at this point? Is it, this has got to be wrong, this is all going to be rectified in a moment, this can't be right? Or did it dawn on you what was happening?
No, I thought, okay, well, they're going to ask me a few questions and then they'll let me catch my flight. You know, I remember saying to them after about 15 minutes, "How long is this going to take? Because, you know, my flight's leaving in an hour and a half." And they kind of laughed at me and said, "Madam, you're not getting on that flight." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "You're not catching that plane." And then I started to cry because that's when it began to dawn on me that this was serious and this wasn't just a few cursory questions in the airport for security reasons, but that these people might genuinely want to arrest me.
That moment when it goes from confusion to terror.
I mean, I had been nervous that day and the day prior that something wasn't right. The receptionist in my hotel had pulled me aside and said, "Kylie, some men have come here asking about you." And I said, "What do you mean? What type of men? Who are these people?" He said, "They're very bad men." And then when I pushed him to tell me who they were exactly, he kind of clammed up and became nervous. I felt, okay, I don't know who these men are and what they want, but it's probably for the best that I'm leaving. And I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. And I just thought, it's just a big misunderstanding. They're going to realise that I've done nothing wrong. They're going to realise that I'm just an academic researcher.
You were essentially dobbed in by somebody. Do you know who dobbed you in?
I do. For me, it's very confusing. I don't know exactly why he did what he did. I would like to know, but I probably never will. It's either because he was working for the Revolutionary Guards from the beginning and flagged me as suspicious, or he was arrested by them after I had interviewed him. He was an interview subject of mine, a Bahraini. And possibly he was arrested. They went through his phone, found messages from me on his phone, and obviously asked, "Who's this foreign woman you've been meeting up with?" And then he cut a deal with them to get out of whatever legal trouble he was in by helping to entrap me and working with them to arrest me.
So for anyone who doesn't understand, who they are and what they do, so there's the separate Iranian army, isn't there? And then there's this Revolutionary Guard.
Yes.
So do they run almost independently? Are they almost a law unto themselves?
They are, yes. They're a state within a state, for sure.
Are they notorious for being heavy-handed? Are they frightening?
I think they have a frightening reputation.
You're at the airport, you are bundled up by this group of intimidating Revolutionary Guards. I'm only beginning to fathom how terrified you'd feel. What happened? Where did they take you? What was next?
So I was interrogated or interviewed in the airport for several hours. Then they were telling me they're taking me to a prison. I guess at this point, nothing sank in. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't really think I was going to prison. I thought, well, why would I go to prison? I've done nothing wrong. I mean, it just seemed ludicrous to me. Rather than take me to prison, they took me first to a safe house in North Tehran, where I was interrogated overnight until about, I think, 10 a.m. the next day.
You're in a house. You don't know where you are. How many were there? How many guards? Were they male? I mean, what was their demeanour? What were they doing and saying? And
there was a large group of men. I don't know how many, maybe between 10 and 15. I didn't see half of them, though. They were all in other rooms. Some of them were interrogators. Others, I think, were going through my emails. Then, at around midday the next day, they'd checked me into a hotel, which was clearly under their control, but it was also functioning as a regular hotel and had regular guests.
Did they let you make a phone call? Were you able to call anyone? Were you able to speak to anyone other than the unknown men in this room?
No. All of my electronic devices were taken away from me from the very beginning in the airport. They did let me send a message on WhatsApp to my family saying I'm not coming back from Iran tonight because I'd missed my flight. But the way that I phrased it, it was clear it wasn't coming from me. I deliberately used clunky, formal language in English and they knew I was at the airport. I'd messaged my family from the airport before checking in saying I've arrived at the airport, I'm about to take my flight. So I believe it was clear to my family from that moment that something had happened.
Who did you send that message to?
My parents and my husband.
How long were you there for?
Around a week in this hotel. I was told I can't leave the hotel room, so I was basically imprisoned inside this hotel room. And they would come to the hotel room to interrogate me each day.
Did they hurt you?
No, not at this point, no. They said, we're moving you to another location. Don't worry, we're just taking you to a different hotel or a different apartment. And I said, you're taking me to prison, aren't you? And they said, no, we're not. No, we're just moving you to somewhere else. But at this point, the feeling I had in my gut was I'm in deep trouble. And they put a mask over my face. I wasn't allowed to see where we were driving. And, I got very car sick because we're winding our way through Tehran traffic. I can't see anything or where we're going. And I think it was about a half-hour journey to Evin. I'd heard of Evin because of its sort of notorious reputation prior to the revolution for torture, and it's famous as the prison for political prisoners. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know it was Evin. It was only other prisoners later on inside the ward I was in that told me, no, you're in Evin. At that point, it really sunk in. I am getting admitted to prison. And what on earth is going to happen to me? And I was so confused because I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what I was being charged with, who these men were, where I was going. I was afraid they would torture me. I was afraid they would rape me. So I didn't feel safe. And I was just, I was really scared and really confused. I was put in a car and driven to the Du Aleph unit 2A, which is controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. So it's a prison within a prison. It's a detention unit for Revolutionary Guards, arrested security and political prisoners. I guess at that time, if you had have asked me where do I think I'm going, I guess I would have thought I'm going to a proper prison, you know, where there are other inmates and you sleep in bunk beds or something and, you know, you have roommates. But no, I was thrown into solitary confinement in this max security detention centre controlled by the Revolutionary Guards. And it's essentially a black hole. It's a black site. It's outside the scope or the control of any other organisation other than the RGs.
How long were you in there?
Almost 2 years.
In this prison within a prison?
Yes. I was arrested and held there for, 23 months.
Are you able to describe it for me? I mean, you're in solitary confinement. How big's the room? What does it look like? And sounds and smells and... Can you describe it for me?
Sure. So I was in many different rooms, but the first room I was put in, I would say, is the extreme solitary confinement room designed to break you. It's psychological torture. You go completely insane. It is so damaging. I would say I felt physical pain from the psychological trauma I had in that room. It's a 2x2 metre box. There is no toilet, there is no television, there is nothing whatsoever other than a phone on the wall for calling the guards. There's no window. There had been a window in my room and it had been boarded up with a piece of sheet metal. So I could hear some sounds from outside, and sometimes I had a kind of a sliver of light coming through a crack in the sheet metal and reflecting on the wall opposite. So I could tell when the sun was out. I could tell when it was dawn and dusk because there were birds in the trees outside, and they would tweet in the morning and in the evening. But other than that, the light was on 24/7. There was no real way of knowing the time. I'm fairly tall and I could only just stretch out on the floor without my head and my feet touching the wall on either side. There was a carpet, kind of an old, dirty, stained carpet, and that was all. I had 3 blankets. They were old, they were itchy, they were kind of military blankets full of other people's hairs, full of God knows what, bits of skin, bits of rubbish. They smelt bad. They were really itchy. I had to use one as a pillow, one as a mattress, and one to cover myself so I wouldn't be cold, yet I was still cold. You know, I spent 4 weeks in that room. After the 2-week mark, I was flipping out completely. I'd lost it. I'd lost the plot. I was completely crazy. Just entertaining your brain for such a long period of time. They wouldn't come every day for interrogation toward the end, so I'd have days and days, every weekend as well, where I was just alone in this room, locked in a room 23 hours a day with nothing to do. So I was, by the end of it, a crazy lady.
My God.
Yeah.
How do you know? Did you mark the time? How did you know that one day where was a new day? I mean, did you do anything to... What do you do with your mind?
I found a piece of rock in the outdoor exercise area, and we were taken outside for half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening. So I found a little rock there and I'd used it to scratch into the soft plaster of the wall, a line for each day I'd been there.
This box, tiny, tiny little box that you were thrown into, the lights are on all the time. Could you sleep?
You know, I didn't sleep very much the first few nights. I couldn't eat anything and I couldn't sleep. My emotional state was just so volatile and I was so anxious. You know, my heart was beating fast, I was breathing heavily. I was basically having a prolonged anxiety attack or a panic attack. I was crying. You know, I certainly couldn't sleep. But after a while, I did get used to sleeping with the lights on. There was also a noise coming from the phone. I don't know whether it was deliberate or not. Maybe the phone was broken, or maybe it was some sort of static interference noise that was designed to disturb you. So there was just this constant hum, this constant static sound coming out of the phone 24 hours a day. And either it was part of the psychological torture or the phone was just broken, but that really disturbed me as well. So having that constant noise and the light on 24/7, it was challenging. It took me a while to adjust, but once I did, I felt like I slowed my brain down and I could exist, by the 3 and 4 week mark in that room. I was sort of existing in a half asleep, half awake state where I would sort of drift in and out of my memories and drift in and out of various ideas in my head and just stare at the wall for hours and pass the time in this lethargic state, almost like a form of meditation. So I managed to slow my brain down and just not think about anything and stop feeling anything, dulling my emotions, dulling my thought processes, trying to escape my individuality as a human being and just exist on instinct alone.
Did they break your spirit?
There were a few times in that early period that I felt broken. I felt if I have to endure another day of this, if I could, I'd just kill myself. But of course I never tried, and I never took that step. I don't know whether I really wanted to or if it was just, everything was just too much to bear. If I could knock myself out, if I could just take some drug that would knock me out and, have me sleep 24 hours a day or something, I would have taken it straight away. But after a few weeks, I started to get angry about what I was being subjected to, angry about the fact that I'd done nothing wrong, and here I was being psychologically tortured and being accused of all sorts of ridiculous crimes and all sorts of ridiculous things in these interrogations. And that anger woke up my emotional side again and gave me strength. I drew strength from my anger and indignation at what had happened to me and became stubborn and started to fight back and started to break the rules. Because I thought, I don't deserve this. Who are these people to do this to me? So I did have a moment after a few weeks in that solitary confinement cell where I managed to channel my anger into strength. And I wasn't broken after that.
You're in this first box for 4 weeks. Where did you go after that? What happened?
After a month, I was moved into a slightly bigger room, so 3 metres by 2 metres or 2.5 metres, and it had a squatter toilet and a television. And I was still alone, and I spent maybe another month there alone. But at least I didn't have to put on a mask and have the guard escort me to the toilet. I could go to the toilet in the middle of the night, and I had a TV which was only of limited use to me because I didn't understand Farsi. And at this point, the TV was locked on one channel only. We didn't have a remote. It was the iFilm channel, which is Persian language serial soap operas. And without fail, from 8:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, this one channel would be started up on my TV remotely by the guards. And I couldn't change the volume, I couldn't mute it, I couldn't turn it off, couldn't change the channel. And these serials would be repeated 2, sometimes 3 times a day. The same episode, all in a language I didn't understand. And for me, it was almost a form of torture in and of itself, even though the TV was there to entertain me and it was supposed to be better to be there with the TV. I just remember so many times, lying and covering my head with a blanket and trying to block out the noise of this foreign language and trying to sleep, trying to get a nap in the middle of the day and not being able to because of this damn TV.
When was your trial and where was it?
My trial started in June 2019. So I was arrested in September, and from September till June I'd been waiting. Once interrogations finished, I had nothing to do. I was just waiting in my cell every day for some sort of outcome, whether that be a diplomatic solution or me going to court, I didn't know. And I was taken to the court, and some of my interrogators were there. The judge, the representative of the prosecutor, my lawyer, whom I didn't know and wasn't allowed to speak with. All of the discussions that were happening in Farsi in the court, nothing was translated for me. So I was just sitting there in this chair in the middle of the room with sort of a ring around me of Revolutionary Guards and other people, and this judge and prosecutor sitting at a bench in front of me, much higher up. And I was there for several hours, answered some of the judge's questions, then was told, okay, we're done, and I have to go back to the prison. There was no outcome from that court. I didn't have a clue what was going on.
You seem so composed. How you talk about it, it's like you're talking about someone else.
It feels like it happened to someone else. It doesn't feel like my life. You always think, this stuff will never happen to me, you know. If you see stories on the news about Aussies in trouble overseas, you think that, gosh, that's horrible, but it won't happen to me. These things don't happen to ordinary people like me. So, yeah, I feel a bit detached from it still. I feel like it is somebody else's story. Maybe I haven't properly processed it all yet.
You said that you were doing some things when you were in prison, naughty things to try to, get yourself put into the public system. So two things. One, that says to me that you just knew that you were going to stay. You knew that you were going to be found guilty and stay in jail. So does that mean that at that point you gave up any hope that you would be released?
I had hope I would be released with the assistance of the Australian government, because everybody told me, all the prisoners I was in touch with inside the Dualif unit said, the Iranian government always makes deals for foreigners. They always make a deal and a diplomatic exchange or something and send you home. So I did have hope that I would be traded in a diplomatic deal once I'd heard that this was something that they did. But you have nothing to lose. Sure, they could punish me, but there was precious little that they could take away from me, which they hadn't already taken. Yes, I got banned from everything, but there were reasons for why I did what I did. And
what did you do?
Oh, gosh. Well, the first kind of resistance I did were hunger strikes. I think I did 7 hunger strikes because I guess you're damaging yourself. And this is a very common tactic, as you know, for prisoners all over the world. But the biggest thing I did was I managed to escape from the unit. They had renovated the outdoor exercise area and we'd been moved to a new place, which was a courtyard. And I'd seen, based on these renovations, a way to scale the wall and climb up on the roof of the facility. And one day I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. Like, I have nothing to lose. And there was a sort of a serrated, corrugated iron sort of spikes on part of the wall. So I just took some socks with me and put them over my hands and then grabbed onto them, hoping they weren't too sharp so I'd be able to scale that part of the wall, and it was pretty effective. And I climbed the wall, got up on the roof, disappeared from view, so I was able to walk all the way to the end of the complex and see over the wall of the prison off into the residential neighbourhood of Evin nearby. There was a little river, there was a little forest. I could have climbed down from the roof via a nearby tree and sort of made my way across to the river, and it was a very shallow river. I might have been able to cross it and get out into the residential neighbourhood, which was very surprising. I probably could have tried to escape. But
why didn't you?
Well, where would I have gone? What would I have done? I didn't speak the language. I was in a prison uniform. Without somebody on the outside to help me, to pick me up in their car or something. I don't know what I would have done. I didn't have any money. And if they caught me, it would have been, really serious. So...
Did you contemplate it for long?
I did contemplate it when I was up there because it took them about 20 minutes to find me. So I was sort of free to walk around on the roof for quite some time, and it was a beautiful day, blue sky, there were green leaves and trees everywhere and birds flying overhead, and I just kind of basked in the sun, and I yelled stuff from the roof to entertain my roommates who refused to leave the courtyard down below, and I said, "Salam Tehran, hello Tehran." I was screaming this at the city from the roof and screaming, "Azadi, Azadi, freedom." They couldn't get to me on the roof, so some of them came up on a neighbouring roof of a neighbouring building, which had stair access. And the judicial representative for the prison came, and that was the first time I'd seen him. And he tried to calm me down, tried to calm the situation, said, "What are your demands? What's wrong?" And I said, "I've got this ridiculous court. I want to go to court. I want to finish this. I want to be moved to the public prison. And I've been banned from phone calls with my family. I want to call my family. And I want to see the ambassador." And these were my demands. So I was able to draw attention to my situation. I got a 2-minute phone call to my father, just 2 minutes. And I had said, "I want 10 minutes. So the interrogators were very, very, very angry. And
What did you say to your dad?
I don't think I was very nice to him. I was sort of panicking and screaming and upset, and I just was saying, "When are you going to get me out? What's going on? Why is the government doing nothing? This court's a joke. I've been banned from consular meetings. That's against international law. Why am I still here? Why is nobody doing anything?" And I said, "Go to the media. Go to the media, expose what's happening. Go to the media." But nobody listened to that. Nobody listened to my will on that one.
How was your dad when you spoke to him? I can't imagine how he was feeling.
My poor parents have been through hell. In many ways, what they experienced was worse than what I experienced, because as a parent, you just assume the worst and you don't know what's happening to your child.
Come on, speak up.
And my family are just simple people. They're just country people. They're not experts in Middle Eastern studies. You know, they haven't really been to the Middle East. You know, they know nothing about Iran. They don't know where I am, who's captured me and why. They're really out of their depth, and I think it was very traumatic for them, and they're still quite traumatised by what happened, and they've been through their own journey. So I feel terrible about putting them through that. And, you know, in this particular phone call, my dad was great. I think I was yelling and screaming and probably crying too, and he took it all in his stride and said, "Don't worry, we're working on it. We'll get you out. We'll get you out." I was told by the judge in this session, if you answer the questions quickly and we get this over and done with, then this will be the last time you see me, the last time you come to the court. It'll be over. And I had been pushing for it to be over because I had heard that once your court is finished, you get moved to the public prison, to a prison where you're much more free, you get to live with other people, you're not locked in a room 23 hours a day, you're not under the control of the Revolutionary Guards. So the whole thing was just, you know, a kangaroo court, as we say in Australia. It was a joke. And the verdict was predetermined. The judge wasn't even pretending to be free and impartial. He was very clearly one of them, you know, one of the Revolutionary Guards. I was brought into the judge's office to receive the sentence, and there was a 1-page document outlining my guilt, supposed guilt, and at the end of the document it said I received 10 years as my punishment. And I had to write some sort of response to that. And I just wrote, "I reject this, you know, ridiculous charge. You know, you can do whatever you like to me, but freedom is an attitude, freedom is a state of mind, and I am free. No matter what you do to me, I'm still free." And that's what I wrote.
10 years.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking. I didn't really have an expectation. I knew they would give me a prison sentence by this point, you know, having seen the sham, which was the court, having heard the stories of other prisoners, 10 years was the maximum penalty for the crime I was charged with. So I was given the maximum sentence. I think had my ordeal been made public, there's no way I would have got 10 years. But there was no spotlight, there was no attention. It was all behind closed doors, under cover of darkness, conducted secretly, and there was nobody to hold them to account. And without any evidence whatsoever, I was just simply given a 10-year sentence.
I have to ask you, are you or have you ever been a spy?
No, that's crazy. There's no evidence of me being a spy for any country. Even the Revolutionary Guards couldn't figure out which country I was supposedly spying for. I was eventually charged with being an Israeli spy because that was the easier thing. You know, any mention of Israel in Iran, you know, Israel is the little Satan or whatever they call it. And for the Revolutionary Guards in particular, that was just the easiest country they could try to link me to. But even a few months before my release, so mid-2020, they were floating a theory that I was an MI6 agent, you know, and this was well after I'd been convicted and tried of being an Israeli agent. And during my interrogation, they were working on the theory I was an Australian spy for a while. I was also accused of being a Bahraini spy because of my research on Bahrain. So they really had no idea. There was no evidence.
Did you know that back here we had no idea you were locked up? It was a good 12 months into your sentence before it even made news and it was made public. Did you have any idea that nobody knew?
Yes, I knew that it was deliberately being kept out of the media. That was against my wishes. And from the first 6 weeks to 2 months of my arrest, I'd been demanding getting my phone calls cut because I was demanding of my family they go to the media. I knew when it was leaked to the media. I don't know from which source or how, but my roommate came into the room one day after having a call with her family, and she said, "Kylie, this is my friend Niloufar, you are all over the media. Everybody knows." And not only you, Jolly and Mark as well, because I'd known Jolly was there by that point and I'd managed to speak to her.
So when they made news, that's when you made news?
Yes, yeah. I think I've been told that the media knew about my incarceration, but they were told by the government to keep it quiet, and they deliberately didn't publish.
Why?
Because the line being run by the government was that trying to find a solution diplomatically behind the scenes with Iran was the best approach for getting me out. And that the media would complicate things and could make Iran angry and piss them off and make things worse for me. I took a very different view of the situation based on my own experience being inside there. But that was the view of the government, and the media played ball for months at least at the beginning, until I think these two backpackers got arrested, and the media already knew my name and knew I was there too. So once that got out, then they published my name as well. And certainly when it did become public, I did notice much greater attention was paid to my health and my condition. So I certainly saw benefits from that, and I'm not convinced that the quiet diplomacy argument stacks up in such a case, although each case is different. And I am very thankful to the Australian government for, you know, freeing me in the end. My family said Maurice Payne was fantastic in particular, and Nick Warner, and the Australian ambassador to Iran, Lyndall Sachs, was phenomenal as well.
Were you ever tortured? Physically? Were you ever hurt?
I was physically beaten on one occasion. I was never physically tortured. The things that you think about, I don't know, pulling fingernails or being electrocuted, none of that was ever done to me. I was beaten up once and forcibly injected with a syringe of tranquilizer against my will. And that was in early 2020.
Why were you beaten up? Was there a reason, or was it just...
Yes.
They could.
I was trying to leak one of my letters that I'd written to the public prosecutor outlining the injustices of my case. I'd written that letter in January 2020, and in February 2020 I had written a copy of it and passed it to a doctor in the hospital. This doctor, and I'd got it past all of the guards and all of their checks, and the guard didn't see anything, but I gave it to the doctor, and the doctor betrayed me and took the letter, looked at it, and then put it on the table in front of the guard and said, "I can't do that, sorry." And the guard went crazy because she knew she'd be punished, and she knew she'd made mistakes in not checking me properly before taking me to the doctor. And she called them a male colleague of hers, and both of them assaulted me. That doctor, I said to him in Farsi, "What are you doing? Are you a real doctor or are you an interrogator? I'm your patient. Like, if you can't do that, throw it in the bin. You don't have to show them. You don't have to show these guys that I've given you a letter. Just bin it."
I understand that was formerly a chicken slaughterhouse and has been referred to as the worst women's prison in the world. Is that title warranted?
I think the title of worst women's prison in the world is a bit of an over-exaggeration. I'm sure there are worse places, although I'm not an expert, obviously. It was pretty bad, but, you know, I didn't necessarily suffer there to the extent that I suffered in Evin, in Dualef, under the control of the Revolutionary Guards. There is nothing like solitary confinement. That is just hell. But being transferred there and suddenly having other women around me, for me, it was a positive experience because I wasn't alone anymore. And it was very interesting to meet some of the other prisoners there because this was a regular public prison. There were very few political prisoners. Nearly everybody was an actual criminal. Or, you know, often I think an innocent person who'd fallen victim to a corrupt justice system, but not for a security or political related crime. So I went from being alone for 7 months in a room to sleeping in a room with 100 women. The fact that I wasn't alone and I had friends after so long was really important to me.
Did you ever have any trouble from any other prisoners? Did they try to cause any trouble for you?
No, I understood that I had protection. I think the Revolutionary Guards had told Karchak Prison, if anything happens to this foreign woman who is of high value to us, then there will be hell to pay. If anybody wanted to be physically violent to me, I would have had tens more prisoners jump in on my side and protect me. I had a lot of friends there. I was friends with nearly everybody.
Were you a little bit of a celebrity?
I wouldn't say a celebrity, but everybody knew who I was because I was the token Westerner, the only Westerner in the prison.
How much contact was there with home at this point? I know that it depended on where you were and phone calls. You mentioned letters. Were you able to get many back and forth?
I was never able to send or receive letters. My family, the only contact I really had with them was via WhatsApp. If I was allowed to call, I would call from WhatsApp, and sometimes I would be allowed to read their messages on WhatsApp.
What about your husband? Would they let him ring or make any contact? Were you able to make contact with him?
At the beginning, yes. I called him quite a bit when I was in interrogation. But due to his behaviour on the phone calls and his general behaviour after my arrest, he was seen as suspicious and they didn't want me to call him. So I kind of stopped calling him based on what they wanted, the Revolutionary Guards, and in the end, what I wanted.
He is an Israeli citizen. They wanted you to recruit him, is that right? Bring him over there.
They didn't want me to recruit him. I think they wanted me to lure him to Iran so that they could arrest him and get their hands on an extremely high-value hostage. I mean, can you imagine if the Revolutionary Guards got their hands on an Israeli? It would be the price they could, demand for that. It would be a PR coup. it would be just, it's just unimaginable. Like, and he would never have come. They were dreaming to think that my husband would be so stupid as to travel to Iran. They said to me, I have to call him and say, if he comes to Iran and lets them interview him, they will let both of us go.
Given I asked it of you, it's only fair to ask it about him. Has he ever been a spy?
No. I would know if he was. You know, I lived with him for years. I never saw any evidence of any spying activity or anything. I mean, he's pretty Australian, actually, for a new immigrant. Like, he's engaged with the Australian culture, and he's not as attached to Israel as you might think, and he certainly doesn't have that sort of strong Zionist ideology. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left Israel. He wouldn't have moved to Australia.
So all of this time while you are this pawn being used in what is a diplomatic game, how did you stay sane through all of this?
I think feeling that I was an active participant in my fate and my destiny really was important to me. That I wasn't just a damsel in distress, shut up in my tower, waiting for other people to come and save me. I knew when a diplomatic deal started to be talked about. I knew that the reason that they didn't engage in any meaningful negotiations with the Australians was because they wanted to recruit me. They wanted me to work for them as a spy.
Did they straight out ask you?
Yes, many times.
What did they say?
That if I cooperated with them and agreed to become a spy for them, they would free me. I could win my freedom. I could make a deal with them. They obviously wanted to have their cake and eat it too, so they wanted to both recruit me and make a deal with the Australian government to get something in return for my freedom. I don't think they were particularly interested in spying on Australia. They were more interested in me using my academic status as a cover story and travelling to other Middle Eastern countries and perhaps European countries, perhaps America, I don't know, and collecting information for them there. I understood that I was being transferred from Karchak back to the Douala facility in Evin prison as some sort of step toward my freedom. I was told I'd only have to suffer through that hellish nightmare for 1 week, max. The ambassador told me 3 days, and the interrogators on the same day told me 1 week. So I knew they'd deliberately led her astray about it, and if they said 1 week, well, it could have been max 2 weeks. I was thinking, you know, you can't really trust what they say. But I knew that that was some sort of precondition or step for whatever reason to my freedom, that I had to be back under the exclusive control of the Revolutionary Guards again in order to be freed. Once the 2 week mark passed, you know, I was really suffering there. It was horrible. And their behaviour toward me during that 5 weeks that I ultimately spent there was disgusting. I was being punished. People were angry, I think, that I was going to be freed. And were using that as an opportunity to make me suffer before I was freed. It was one of the worst periods of time that I spent in prison, was that 5 weeks before my freedom. And after 5 weeks, Lyndall Sachs, the ambassador, came for a meeting. I was pulled down. I didn't know who I was meeting or where I was going. Masked, pulled into this room and met with Lyndall. And I was so happy to see her, and she's so strong and gives such positive energy and positive vibes. So it was great to see her. And she, you know, I said, look, I'm broken. I can't deal with this anymore. I don't know why I'm here. Why? You told me 3 days. I've been here 5 weeks. And she said, Kylie, hold on for another 48 hours. We're going to get you out.
Did you still believe it would happen, or what were your thoughts that very final night in that cell?
I had hope at that point. I'd allowed myself to hope, but there was a little voice in the back of my head that said maybe it wouldn't happen, maybe it'd get cancelled again. I did manage to sleep a few hours and still paced my cell as usual until the, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and woke up very early in the morning. Nothing happened. It was a very long delay. I was supposed to be out by 11 a.m. and I was still in my cell at 11 a.m. and I had to go through this checkout procedure from the prison fill in a customer satisfaction survey, basically, in Farsi about my satisfaction or otherwise of the Douala facility, which was hilarious.
What did you write?
Well, they asked me all sorts of things about the food and about my treatment and everything. I wrote the truth, but I was also really rushing to go, so I didn't really have time to sit down and write in Farsi. You know, the food was terrible because of X, Y, Z. But I did say the truth. I said, this is appalling. You know, you should treat prisoners better. You should do better than this.
When you landed in Canberra, I know you had to go into hotel quarantine. When was the first moment you saw your family?
My mother was in hotel quarantine with me, so she was in the hotel before I arrived. So I opened the door of the hotel room and she was there, and that was lovely. Yeah, she just gave me the biggest hug, and she's very understated, so she didn't say anything dramatic. No mass outpouring of how much she loves me, but of course she said she loves me, and I said I love her, and we just hugged and had some low-key time together, mother-daughter time. It was nice.
When was the moment that you felt safe?
I don't know if I feel safe even now. I guess you always have a lingering fear. When I was in hotel quarantine for that 2 weeks after arriving back in Australia, I still felt maybe there's cameras watching me, or, you know, it was sort of like a 5-star prison cell, the hotel quarantine. And I liked it. It was familiar to me. It was comforting to be locked in a room, but yet still have internet and good food and whatever. But when I left that hotel quarantine, the first time I walked the streets, my friend Rosie was there and my mum was with me. And at midnight, we were allowed out technically. So at midnight, we went and walked the streets of Canberra, and they were empty and it was dark. And I just felt terrified. I felt it was an overwhelming experience because it was the first time I'd been outdoors without being caged in somewhere or with a camera on me for almost 2.5 years. And I felt like somebody's going to come running after me and tap me on the shoulder and say, no, get back in the hotel.
Your homecoming was bittersweet, in as much as there was one person who wasn't there to greet you. How did you find out that your marriage wasn't in the same state as it was when you left Australia nearly 3 years ago?
I knew that it wasn't in the same state that it was when I left. I knew that there was a problem at least 12 months before I came home. He had changed, and I was upset and disappointed that he wasn't supporting me to the extent that I would have hoped he would. He stopped telling me he loved me over the phone. I understood that something had shifted for him, and for me too. I didn't necessarily think that our marriage was over, but I was thinking to myself, based on that, maybe I didn't want to stay with him. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise that my marriage came to an end. But although he never told my family and never told me that he wants to leave me and maintained the deception right up until the end, I knew that there was something wrong. I didn't know about the infidelity or that the other person involved would be who she was.
Who told you that he was having an affair?
My mother told me when I arrived in the hotel quarantine, because I said, okay, Mum, where's Ruslan? What's going on? I haven't even heard from him. He hasn't even called me or anything to say, I'm happy you're free. What's the deal? I said, you've got to tell me, Mum. I mean, it's obvious something's up. I'm strong, I can handle it. And so she'd found out the day before from a third person, a third party who wasn't really known to the family, but a lot of people unfortunately knew about this affair. And this person, after seeing on the news that I had been freed, thought, I don't think the family knows and somebody's got to tell them. And then my family found out and called Ruslan and he confirmed it.
Can you tell us the role that Dr. Kylie Baxter played in your career, in when you were incarcerated? I understand that she was a colleague, she was your PhD supervisor. What else was she doing when the liaison, is that correct, with your family?
Yeah, she was the liaison between Melbourne University and my family after my arrest.
So keeping your mum and dad informed
And
about
Ruslan.
Ruslan about your condition.
Yes. Yeah. So a conflict of interest emerged there, obviously.
Is she the one that he was having an affair with?
Yes.
Did Ruslan, your husband, stand up and fight for you while you were in prison?
I don't know what he was doing or what he wasn't doing. I haven't spoken to him.
Have you spoken to Dr. Baxter?
No.
You're locked up for 804 days. You finally come home to find that your husband has had an affair with the woman that was meant to be liaising and supporting your family. Was that just the ultimate kick in the guts?
The nature of it, given my closeness to both of them, was very disappointing for me. In a way, it's been harder for me to process and come to terms with that than it has been what happened to me in Iran.
I respect your dignity and I respect your grace, but my God, you're locked up in prison. It's not like you were on holidays in Hawaii. You're in a jail on the other side of the world. Of course things are going to change and shift. And okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting angry for you.
Thank you.
You know, your wife is going through hell. Come on.
I think he suffered a lot at the beginning too, and was quite vulnerable, according to him. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't want to know. I don't want to dwell on it. I just want to move on. Honestly, I wish him all the best. He's not an evil person. She's not an evil person. I hope they're happy together, and I hope we can all just move on with our lives.
What did you miss the most when you were in prison?
One of the hardest things for me was not having fresh air and not being able to go outside, to feel the wind in my hair like we are now, to be in nature. And, you know, I really, really love the great outdoors, and to be prevented from doing that for such a lengthy period of time was really, really tough for me. I always knew I would survive and I would come back. I love Australia, I love the bush, I love the landscape here. 100% I would see the bush again.
Does the future look bright to you yet?
It does. I'm very positive about the future, at least optimistic. I hope, you know, I don't know what the future will hold for me. I don't have a trajectory in mind necessarily. I would love to write a book about my experiences. I put a lot of thought into it whilst I was still in prison, because I obviously had a lot of time on my hands. And writing's quite therapeutic for me too. I've been doing a bit of writing. So I hope that's something I can pursue in the future. Right now, I just want to focus on healing, recovery, rest, trying to get a sense of normality back into my life. catching up with friends and family, tying up loose ends, you know, just trying to re-establish myself, put down roots again and reconnect with reality and with my freedom and, yeah, try and get on with it, get on with living my life.